We begin on January 26, 1994, as Frank Hartnett was escorting his 73-year-old mother, Sally, on a flight from Connecticut to her winter home in Florida.
We were walking down the concourse, and we had to keep stopping so she could catch her breath. So it's just very unusual for her. Never saw her do that before.
Hi.
I love my mother very much. Whatever she wants or whatever she needs, she can have it.
Hi there. How are you? Are you ready to get away from the cold weather up here? Good. Oh, that's
I had no feeling whatsoever that anything would go wrong.
Excuse me, watch your elbows.
My mother said, "Can I get a drink of
Watch
water?"
your elbows.
Excuse me, ma'am. Can I
Yes,
have some
sir.
water?
You sure may.
She's feeling kind of warm.
She said, "I've just taken nitro. I need oxygen."
There you go, sir.
And as I handed her the cup, she dropped it. And she said, "I need oxygen." And that was the last thing she said.
Sir, is everything okay?
Jeanette McClarty was one of the flight attendants.
He told me that she had taken a nitro pill, which immediately alerted me to the fact that she obviously had some heart problem.
It just seemed impossible that she could have another heart attack. A year after having a quadruple bypass, you're 30,000 feet up in the air, and in your mind, you're trying to think, what the heck are we going to do now?
Senior flight attendant Judy Wild took charge of the situation.
Feeling better? Are you cool?
When I first heard that we had an ill passenger in the back and that we were starting oxygen,
Judy, this is her son.
I didn't think too much about it. This really occurs more than you would imagine.
Would you get some cold cloths for me? Ma'am, are you feeling any better?
But when I got in front of her and shook her by the shoulders and said, "Can you hear me?" I got no response.
Can you hear me?
And I thought, uh-oh, she's in trouble. I immediately started trying to find a pulse. I did not find
Can you hear
one.
me? Page for Dr. Jeanette.
I knew if I didn't have someone to help me, that the other flight attendants and I would have to do the best that we could do.
When we continue,
She has no pulse.
You're totally, absolutely helpless. The plane is just so, it got smaller and smaller and smaller. You just didn't know, there was nowhere to go. Man, you're stuck.
When Frank Hartnett's 73-year-old mother, Sally, suffered a cardiac arrest during a flight to Florida, the only hope for her survival was in the hands of the people who happened to be on board.
May I have your attention, please? If there is a doctor, nurse, or paramedic on board, will you please contact your flight attendant? Thank you.
This guy came out of nowhere,
I'm a doctor.
and if he didn't come from heaven, nobody did.
I'm getting no response here. I can't find a pulse.
Excuse me.
Dr. Tom Candell, an internist, happened to be on the flight.
She was pale and clammy. She was not breathing on her own, and she had no pulse. This passenger was clinically dead.
We told the captain that he had to land the airplane.
But the plane was 30 minutes from the nearest airport.
I was very frightened to see him start CPR on her. I was very afraid she was going to die. My father had died about 2 years ago, and I kept thinking, I really don't want to go through this again. It's too soon.
1 and 2 and 3 and
At the end, about 10 minutes, for the first time, I thought I had a pulse.
There's a little pulse. Have you got a stethoscope or blood pressure cuff or anything?
I do. I'll get it.
Unfortunately, after that first attempt, we lost the pulse, and we had to resume the CPR.
He knew that her chances were not as good after we had lost her after the first comeback.
And I remember whispering into Judy Wild's ear, "I think we're going to lose her. I don't think she's going to make it."
New York Center, Delta 584. We are declaring a medical emergency at this time. We'd like to divert to Philadelphia.
It had been nearly 20 minutes since Sally's cardiac arrest.
I'm getting a slight pulse.
We got a second pulse, and I listened closely. Sure enough, there was a heartbeat going on, but she was not breathing on her own.
She's arrhythmic. I think we're losing her again.
It was frustrating to see that she wasn't responding. even in the best of hands, CPR could only give between 20 to 30% of the actual cardiac output. Even more frustrating was realizing that the man that was standing over my shoulder and looking down was the son of this passenger, and he was witnessing the demise of his own mother.
1 and 2 and 3.
You're totally, absolutely helpless. The plane is just so, it got smaller and smaller and smaller. You just didn't know, there was nowhere to go. Man, you're stuck. You're right there.
1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5.
We kept working on the patient probably another 5 to 10 minutes, and as we were coming into Philadelphia, the patient all of a sudden, for the first spontaneous time, took a deep breath on her own.
2 and 3. She moaning?
I'm hearing her. We're getting her back.
I thought she's going to make it if we can just get on the ground and let the paramedics do what they can do for her. Once we landed, the paramedics came on board quickly.
And as he was sticking in the angiocath to start the IV, Sally grunted, and I said, "Do you feel that, Sally? Do you feel the pain?" And Sally shook her head. And I said, "Sally, you're feeling the pain because you're alive."
Four months have passed since the incident.
I can feel my strength returning day by day, but a very slow process.
They determined that my mother has an extreme allergic reaction to nitro. So when she put the pill in her mouth in the plane, it bottomed her blood pressure out so far that it killed her.
It was the first time that I had ever taken nitroglycerin.
It would be foolish for one to say, don't take nitroglycerin because it might have a side effect. But when people take any drug, whether it be nitroglycerin or aspirins or any combination of drugs, people should be cautious.
Recently, Sally Hartnett finally got the chance to meet Dr. Kandel.
Good to see you.
Oh, thank God for you. I thank God every day for Dr. Kandel.
Oh, it's great. You're talking to me. That's better than how. That's an improvement.
Life is very fragile, and it's precious, and you guard it as best you can. And when you can't take care of yourself any longer, and somebody comes to assist you, that's something that you never forget. He was my guardian angel, I'll tell you that. Thank you so much for saving. God bless you.
Thank you.
There is no way to describe how grateful you can be to somebody who saved your mother. I am ecstatic that she's okay. But I won't take her on any more trips, anywhere. And I said to the doctor, you are the new travel agent, because I am not going to take her anywhere. I've had enough.
Get your hands off her.
I'm very thankful that Delta has a training program for a stewardess to teach them CPR.
I learned how to serve a Coke after I started flying, but I learned how to do first aid in training before I ever got on an airplane.
All right, let's go.
I want Sally to know that being a factor in bringing her back was a very gratifying feeling. Not for me as a physician, but for me as a fellow human being. And I'm glad that she's there and she's able to give love to her family and receive love from her family.
Next, when we started hitting packed snow and ice slowed down, you could see her wanting to straighten out.
When Dale Criswell and his 20-year-old daughter, Darcy, set out from Coos Bay, Oregon on March 21st, 1994, their 400-mile trip across the state was to be a new beginning for her and her 13-month-old daughter. But along the way, everything suddenly changed.
I have to.
And your mom will be behind me and you'll be up there with me, okay? This was just going to be a quick trip for me to go over to Bend and come back the same day. Then go on up over the mountain, all right? My daughter was moving over to Bend to continue her education in the nursing program over there and work her way through college. I was more coordinated to driving with one hand and dealing with the baby with the other hand than Darcy was, so I just decided, well, we'll just put the baby in my vehicle, and that'll make things a little bit easier on Darcy when it comes time to go over the pass.
There's your mom inside the radio.
Is the load in the back of your vehicle stable? You're not slipping too much, are you?
No, I can see. It's fine.
Okay, just remember, we're going to either miss some slippery conditions up here. It's going to be packed snow and ice.
When we started hitting packed snow and ice slowed down, I like to keep her in my rearview mirror.
How far do we have to go still?
We have about another 2 hours or so before we get to bed.
You could see her wanting to straighten out, but she just clipped the end of the guardrail. I thought maybe she didn't go all the way. Maybe she got hung up on some boulders that would have stopped her.
Watch the baby.
That's when I bail off the side of the hill. All the way down, I'm calling for her, and she's not responding.
Darcy!
And I'm thinking in my mind, oh God, don't let her be dead. Don't let her be dead.
Darcy!
It's a big weight lifted off your shoulders, knowing that, hey, she's alive and there's still a chance to get her out. That's when the engine caught on fire.
That's to be expected. That's a nice area up there.
Dan Tenninger and his cousin happened to be driving the same road.
You could see skid marks going right off the edge of the cliff.
Car over the bank. Like alone when I'm going down.
It looked like someone smoldering fire down there. You couldn't see nothing. But I didn't want to be a spectator and just watch it burn from the top of the cliff.
Police, fire, and ambulance. Do you have an emergency?
Yes, I do. There's a car went off a cliff here, up on Highway 58, up on the pass. I just stopped. It's on fire.
Highway 58, do you know what milepost you're at?
I'm not sure what mile.
The cellular call initially came in to the Eugene EMS Center 55 miles away.
Okay.
Oh, man, those people are dead.
Hang in there, Darcy.
I had to cut her out of her seatbelt. You don't want to move a person with a back injury, but I can feel the heat of the flames on my back. I didn't know if the gas tank was going to explode, because I knew she had at least a half a tank of gas.
It's okay, I gotta get you out. Car's on fire.
I was able to utilize the seat and keeping her body as rigid as possible, pull her out as straight as I can.
I gotta get you away from here. Please, I know. Hang with me.
The rocks were the size of Volkswagens. We were slipping and falling. A tire exploded. Boom! We didn't know what it was. We jumped a little bit.
Oak Ridge Fire and ambulance units were immediately dispatched, but they were more than 20 minutes away.
Don't move him! He could have a broken leg or something in his neck or back.
Do you know if the person is conscious or breathing?
I can't tell. Let me find out. Is he okay? Is he alive? Dan! It's a girl.
female? Is she conscious?
Yes, she's crying.
We weren't but maybe 15, 20 feet away, and the flames had just engulfed the vehicle. The whole left side of her body had taken a beating. There was a lot of blood covering the left side of her face. She said, "Dad, I'm not afraid to die."
Lord, give us strength to make it.
She was more concerned about her baby than she was for herself. Devin was up at the top of the hill. The baby wouldn't have survived the accident. The temperature had dropped to about 20 degrees. She was going into hypothermia.
And there was bags of clothes that had fallen out of her car. So we broke open the bags of clothes, started packing her in these clothes, trying to make her as comfortable as we could.
EMT Mark Leverton was one of the first medics on the scene.
I looked down the hill and said, "Oh my God, you know, what are we going to do?" I didn't think anybody could live through something like that. And I saw probably some of the worst conditions for rescue that you could have.
We're going to need a lot of bodies for picking up and putting her in the stove.
You had steep ground, you had slippery ground. It was going to be a brute force show.
We're going to pick her up as a unit, put her in. Okay.
She kept asking me, how far did I go down? I thought maybe they'd put her in shock. She actually knew how far she fell. So I didn't want to tell her, yeah, you just went 300-400 feet over a cliff, you know, and you're all busted up.
She had some obvious outward signs of cuts and scrapes and bruises, but along with those come internal injuries, which are the silent killers.
Kind of go to your right a little bit.
There were 3 times up the hill where she got real quiet and real limp, and I thought she was gone. But every time she was a fighter, she came back.
2.5 hours after the crash, Darcy was finally pulled out of the ravine.
I still had about a 75-mile drive into St. Charles Hospital in Bend. Your first instinct is to hurry, but I had to remember I still had my granddaughter with me, and I didn't want another accident to happen. It was probably the longest 75 miles that I could have driven.
20-year-old Darcy Criswell was transferred to an Airlife helicopter and taken to St. Charles Medical Center, where neurosurgeon Mark Belza took over her care.
Good to see you. She's been down a little while. She's a little bit cool, but she's moving all extremities.
She had a fractured spine. She had a fractured left elbow. She had a fractured foot, a bruised lung, a perforated lung. Look over here. She could have had a lot worse. She could have been thrown from the vehicle and died. Darcy could have been killed by fire. She came within a half an inch of being paralyzed from the waist down because of her spinal fracture.
I didn't really realize the impact of the accident until I seen my daughter laying in ICU. I must have stayed there quite late, just waiting for her to go to sleep.
A year has passed.
I kind of believe that things happen for a purpose. And it's like, what exactly am I supposed to be learning from this? I mean, was this really necessary?
She'll never be able to be a floor nurse because of her back injury, the weakness in her arm. The requirements are you have to lift, I think, 50 pounds to be able to lift that. She's just now getting to the point where she can lift her daughter. But she's very determined. She's known since she was 8 years old that she was going to go to college.
I am glad that I wore my seatbelt, and I'm really thankful that there were people there to help me.
There was a state trooper down there. He actually let me wear his hat for a while. He said I earned it.
My dad, to me, was a hero. I think as kids and teenagers, people don't appreciate their parents. They just kind of forget what all their parents do for them. And it made me really stop and think.
step out of the car, please?